There's some huge space conferences you're going to want to be aware of. It's so much about networking. That is really very valuable. And yes, you feel like you're part of the community. You feel like you found your people. When I was a graduate student, this was 15 years ago, I went to the International Space Development Conference, ISDC, which is put on by the National Space Society. I was the secretary of our local NSS chapter. Our chapter had one Chapter of the Year award. It was a blast. One of the talks that stood out the most to me was by Will Whitehorn of Virgin Galactic. He was the president back then. This was way before Virgin Galactic ever had a successful flight. They were just really starting out, and I was just so inspired by the whole concept. At that same conference, it's the one and only time I've ever seen Elon Musk in person. That was an interesting talk. I also met Buzz Aldrin for the first time. I met Rusty Schwartgart. I met Richard Garriott for the first time. I met Alan Stern for the first time, and we would go on to work together in various capacities, such as running a different conference. There are just really fantastic ways, whether you are a student or whether you're later in your career, whether you're transitioning into space, that you can really take advantage of everything that space conferences have to offer. There's some huge space conferences you're going to want to be aware of, even if you don't attend them. So let me go through this list that someone else prepared. And by the way, if you want a list of space conferences, there are probably a dozen out there that are pretty good. I haven't found one that's 100% complete, but there's a lot of them that list a lot of conferences. And trust me, there are a lot of conferences. If you wanted to, you could go to one or two space conferences every week. You could probably go to one or two space conferences, events, meetings, workshops every single day if you truly wanted to. There's that much going on, that much overlap, but I don't recommend that. I do recommend picking and choosing the ones that are most important to you. One that just ended as of this recording is SpaceCom, also known as Space Congress. I was actually on a planning committee one year for that one. FAA Commercial Space Transportation Conference, that's a smaller one that's coming up in February. Paris Space Week, that's a pretty fun one I've never been to. Satellite is a big one that you're going to hear about quite a bit. That's in Washington, D.C. in March. Space Symposium, that's one of the big, I'd say, two global space conferences. It's always in Colorado Springs in April. Space Tech Expo, that's in Long Beach, California. That's in May. International Space Development Conference, that's the one I was just talking about with the National Space Society. That's in May as well. And that one moves around, so this time it's in Los Angeles. ISS R&D, that's International Space Station Research and Development Conference. That one also moves around. It's in Boston this year in July, August. And I'm also partial to that because I was also on a planning committee for that at one point. Ascend, that's a fairly new conference series that's put on by AIAA. That one's in July, August this year in Las Vegas. International Astronautical Congress, IAC. That one you're going to hear about a lot. It's probably the largest in the world. It's very global. It moves around every year. This year it is in Milan in October, and I'm just so tempted to go just because it's in Milan. And not on this list, but I do want to point out that the Beyond Earth Symposium is in October in Washington, D.C., or November. I think they moved it, and I'm also partial to that because I did help plan that first conference of theirs. What I want you to do right now after this video is to Google your specific space interest and then the word conference or meeting or workshop, because the most valuable gatherings are actually about your own personal interests in the space arena. Space is not one monolithic thing. It is many different industries and areas where we just kind of put together under the space umbrella. So my personal favorite conferences are the ones that are smaller, more intimate, and more targeted. For example, my favorite space conference is the Next Generation Suborbital Researchers Conference, and I am actually part of the planning committee for that, but it is not an annual conference, and it is small. It's just a few hundred people, and it really is targeted more towards these commercial space ventures that want to take people who do research on these suborbital and orbital flights. So whether or not you are interested in space medicine, or whether you're into climate change and how Earth observation satellites can really benefit climate change, or maybe you're into space domain awareness and all the ways that we can track and monitor what's going on, whatever your topic happens to be, go out there, find a conference, find an organization, find a group of people who are working on that topic, and go to those meetings, because those are going to bring you the most value. Not to say that the large ones, the more broad ones, are not valuable, because they are, but just my personal favorite, I like the intimacy of the smaller gatherings that are much more targeted. I do want to talk about what are you going to do if you can't afford to travel around the world to all these conferences. But before I do that, I would be over the moon if you hit subscribe. It's free for you, and it would really mean a lot to me. So thank you. you. So what if you are a student or a professional who can't afford to go around to all these conferences? Well, first off, if you're a student, check out student rates and check out ways that you can volunteer. A lot of the conferences that I attended as a student were either paid for by my university, by my advisor, or I was a volunteer. I helped staff the front desk or hand out microphones or stuff the badges, the things that really need to happen behind the scenes that they usually get volunteers to do. And what comes along with volunteering is usually free registration, and sometimes it is other perks such as a hotel stay or even travel benefit. If you are a member of a certain organization, there's usually a discount. If you are a member of the press, there's usually a discount. The best way to go to conferences in person is if you can simply drive there. If it's in your vicinity, if it's really easy for you to get to, those are the ones that are going to be most accessible to you in person. But if you cannot get there in person, go ahead and check out whether or not they're streaming online and whether you can participate that way. Now, some places do stream online but still charge an enormous fee, so watch out for that. But some of them actually have either free streaming or inexpensive streaming, or if you don't mind waiting a week, sometimes they're posted right here on YouTube for free. But the real benefit of conferences is the networking. So if you can go in person, that is strongly what I'd recommend. You can ask questions while you're in the audience. You can meet people at networking sessions or in the hallways. That is where the true value comes from. Plus, you can travel to really cool destinations. One thing I strongly recommend is you take advantage of the people around you wherever it is you go. There are some people who are just inaccessible except for at these conferences and events. Get to know the people who are your colleagues at these events, even people who would otherwise be unattainable. I remember I met Gwen Shotwell at one of these conferences, and I'm not talking about she was on stage. I'm talking about we had lunch across from each other. So you just really never know who you're going to meet. If you happen to meet me at a conference, please come and introduce yourself. And if you don't know how to network at conferences, go ahead and watch this video linked above. That's where I give you 5 tips on how to network at space conferences and meetings. Best of luck and happy conferencing.